A caked maid is seen working in the Peta Territory Castle, a difficult job that demands early mornings and night watches. The workload is heavy, and Lucius wonders whether that is why she seems nervous, or whether she plans to steal his money and run away. He keeps these thoughts to himself, and the maid startles when she notices his stare. She responds to him, and he tells her he has begun to worry about her. She insists she is fine and explains that in times like these, when jobs are scarce, she wants to work hard and be useful to him. She talks too much, and he can tell she is lying. She adds that she knows a little accounting and asks for a chance to prove herself. Her name is Ira, level 6. Her real skills include fraud, accounting, stealing, and acting as a maid. Her tired behavior is never the real reason that she has planned to betray him from the start. Lucius sighs and thinks he has no choice but to handle her carefully. Sometime earlier, he used to play a game called Heroine Legend, where he became a warrior and trained hard. One day, he wakes up and questions what is happening and where he is. He soon realizes he has become one of the characters inside the game. He wonders if he is dreaming, then tries to understand how he ended up turning into the most frustrating and foolish character. He pinches himself and tries to grasp why he has become this man. He already knows exactly what is supposed to happen to this loser. First, the maid will scam him. Then he will lose his crush to an awful man. After that, his tenant farmer will commit fraud. This time, he intends to change everything. He finally understands why Lucius is so frustrating. He calls for the status window. When it appears, he sees that Lucius is always fooled by others, even though he holds a high position and has real strength. He was confused at first after turning to this character, but now he is calm. If he acts like himself, he will not be treated like a fool. He decides to confront the maid who intends to cheat him. He calls her in and tells her he will consider her request. Then he asks her to bring Robin to him. She agrees and leaves. A knock comes at the door. Robin enters. Lucius asks about the investigation of Ira. Robin reports that Ira often boasts about her accounting skills and frequently meets Carl, a security guard with heavy gambling debt. Robin adds that he does not believe they are romantically involved. Lucius decides he cannot wait for Ira to commit a crime. He wants to test her and quickly understand her intentions. Elsewhere in the castle, a knock comes at Ira's door. She asks who is there, and Robin answers. She opens the door, and he tells her he needs her help. She agrees, and he explains that they need to visit a cellar. They head to the market together. Ira examines the item and notes that the password is easy to guess, saying it was rattled. Robin tells her to hold the other side of the desk and warns her not to scratch anything. Ira asks about the price, then notes she doesn't need to account for something like this. Later that night, Ira and Carl sneak into the castle. Carl admits he does not feel good about what they are doing. Ira tells him the former lord must leave an article and that they will be in serious trouble if caught. She reminds him she is on night duty and that dawn is approaching. She warns him that if he keeps acting scared, he should leave, since she can handle everything on her own. He apologizes, calls her the best, and assures her he trusts her. She rolls her eyes and tells him to take the candle while she works on the lock. Carl agrees. She quietly adds that after this job, she plans to cut ties with him. After some effort, the lock opens and they rush inside. She tells him to leave the candle on the table. Carl obeys. She looks around and whispers that she has found the treasure of a fool. Carl gasps and says that with this, they will never have to work again. At that moment, the Lord strikes Carl with a weapon. Carl collapses to the floor. Ira panics and drops to her knees, begging the Lord for mercy. She trembles as she pleads for him to spare her. He looks at her calmly and tells her to leave Carl where he is. He adds that Carl is probably having a sweet dream right now, as if the blow means nothing to him. Later, Ira lies on a bed in a guest room. She suddenly wakes to find the Lord standing beside her. He notes that she is awake. Startled, she sits up and begs him not to hurt her. He reminds her that he trusted her, yet she tried to steal his father's belongings. She pleads again, her voice shaking. He places a hand on her shoulder and explains that, by law, he should execute her, but he intends to give her a special chance instead. She asks if he means to forgive her without punishment. He shakes his head. He tells her he plans to put her through an intense training session until she learns her lesson. As a priest, he says this is already a generous punishment from her lord. He holds the fabric of her sleeve and asks if she thinks this looks like some kind of forced training. He tells her it is discipline for her crime. Ira, frightened and overwhelmed, stammers for him to stop. He replies that he will simply kill her the moment she shows even the slightest resistance. She freezes, then quietly admits that the punishment suddenly sounds far better. He tells her to smile for him and reminds her that if she dares to cry, she already knows what will happen. After that, the discipline training session begins. After finishing their cardio session, Lucius said He would lock himself away until the next punishment. The following day, after completing a session with Ira, he offered a prayer to God. He quietly asked the heavens to come down to their holy ground, to watch over the tenant farmers who worked so hard they might as well have been sweating blood. He prayed for the land's value to skyrocket and urged the divine presence to assist them. Through that prayer, the farmland became fertilized, enriched, just like in the original game, he remembered. Yet, despite having soil so fertile and successfully preventing Ira from stealing, he still found himself sighing in frustration. He muttered internally that he was on the verge of going broke because of fundamental flaws in the system. His domain received only half of the taxes owed by the farmers. Though he used blessings to nourish the land, the farmers continued to withhold proper taxes, always blaming their shortcomings on famine. Year after year, they treated him like a fool, secretly skimming grain for themselves. Even with the landlord sinking into debt, the farmers and their families showed no concern. Lucius found himself staring at his records, convinced his balance sheet was a complete mess. He felt as though the tenants truly believed he was a loser. Something, he sensed, was definitely going on behind his back. Standing by the window, deep in thought, he suddenly caught sight of a wagon rolling into the estate lawn. Recognizing it as a food wagon, he murmured that they must finally be here to pay their taxes. Grabbing his cane, he decided he had better go and have a talk with whoever had arrived. He headed toward the lawn with Robin at his side. A farmer stood waiting and greeted him politely. Lord, asking about him. Lucius replied that he was fine and asked how the man himself was doing. The farmer joked that he had a fat tummy. Lucius eyed him closely and thought to himself that anyone with 3 slaves must be skimming profits, clearly a tax dodger. He wondered aloud what the man's name was and decided he should check the farmer's status directly. The farmer then explained that they were facing yet another year of famine and insisted that the little they brought was all they could afford to pay. Introducing himself, he said his name was Gilderi Balfa, level 10, a tenant farmer whose peculiar talents included illegal accumulation, obesity, and skillful tax evasion. He promised he would do better next year. Lucius couldn't help but laugh. He announced that they should go inspect the land he had lent to Gilder. The farmer panicked and asked what was wrong. Lucius then ordered Robin to bring his horse. Gilder desperately protested, repeating that he would improve and pay properly. But Lucius simply insisted that they were leaving now. After some time, Lucius and the others finally reached the tenant farmer's land. The farmer pointed ahead nervously, insisting that this was the place. Lucius noticed nothing unusual at first and ordered him to open the door. The farmer hesitantly explained that the house was in disarray because he had recently brought in a few barmaids. Lucius ignored the excuse and began walking toward the house, but the farmer tried to stop him, pleading, "Wait, Lord." Lucius refused to listen. He pushed forward, broke the door open, and stepped inside. 3 boys stood frozen in the room, and the farmer immediately begged for mercy, insisting that he had done nothing wrong. Lucius questioned why the man was pleading if he had committed no wrongdoing. The farmer tried to correct himself, saying he meant only that he had nothing to hide. Lucius suddenly noticed a broken lock lying on the floor. Without hesitation, he smashed the locked door and forced his way into the lower section of the house. Again, the farmer tried to stop him, but Lucius ignored him. Inside, he discovered several grain bags. He demanded an explanation, and the farmer weakly claimed they were empty sacks he had gathered. Lucius doubted him and offered to verify it himself. He introduced himself aloud as if reminding the farmer of who he was, declaring that he was Lucius, with a power level of 89, 18 times stronger than an ordinary man. Then he tore open one of the bags, causing grains to spill across the floor. The sack was clearly full. Lucius noted that this was far from empty grain. The farmer fell to his knees, apologizing and begging for forgiveness. But even in the middle of his excuses, he wondered internally why he was apologizing so desperately. It wasn't as if he were the only one committing this kind of deception. He even felt offended that Lucius was accusing him so aggressively. At that moment, Lucius struck him with his cane, and the farmer collapsed. Lucius then walked past him and approached the farmer's daughters. He declared that their father had admitted to tax evasion and that he had sentenced him to death on the spot. Because they were part of the same family, he explained that they, too, would need to be executed. Terrified, they begged him for mercy. Robin intervened gently, telling Lucius that imposing such a punishment on the daughters was harsh. Lucius replied that he would consider it, then ordered that the girls be taken to the dungeon and tied up. The next day, Lucius saw the outcome of his actions. The tenant farmers, terrified by the previous day's events, brought 10 times the usual amount of grain. If things continued at that pace, he thought, he might actually recover his failing finances. A knock sounded at his door, and a maid announced that Sister Ciara had arrived. Lucius felt that since he had dealt with his most urgent financial problems, it was time to protect his childhood friend from being taken advantage of by another lord. Ciara entered with a gentle greeting, saying she had come after receiving his letter. Lucius noted that she appeared kinder and more composed than he remembered. Her status window identified her as Ciara, level 10, a nun with 78 affection toward him, talented in accounting, carpentry, and innocence. He gently told Ciara that rumors suggested the lord of the neighboring lands had been flirting with her, and that the idea had troubled him greatly. Ciara blushed, saying she hadn't realized he cared so much. Lucius reassured her, saying he would protect her. As an archpriest with the authority granted by the Lord, he could allow her to work under him instead. Ciara thanked him with sincerity. He added that there was one condition when they were together in private: she must call him by his name. When she softly replied, Lucius thanked her warmly. To himself, he thought excitedly that he was definitely going to have a cardio session with her. Later, within the castle, Ciara pleaded with him after hearing about the events at the farm. She begged him to spare the lives of Ira and the tenant farmer's daughters. He thanked her for coming and agreed to reconsider. Sometime afterwards, Lucius descended into the basement with a man who dealt in slaves. Lucius informed him that, at Ciara's request, he had decided not to execute the daughters. Instead, he would sell them to a slave trader. Ira, imprisoned nearby, stared at him with unnerving expressions. Lucius wondered aloud whether people simply went insane when confined for a few days. The slave trader assumed Ira was one of the slaves for sale, but Lucius corrected him, saying the girls were in the next cell. When the trader saw them, he commented on their attractive faces and figures, asking whether it would be possible to remove their tongues to silence them. Lucius agreed, saying he couldn't predict what accusations they might make against him later. Meanwhile, Ira continued to stare at him strangely, muttering the word sweat. Lucius concluded that she was merely pretending to be crazy. The slave trader, intrigued, suddenly asked if he could purchase the pink one as well. Lucius told him to wait, and Ira took a step back, sitting quietly while Lucius thought over the request. The trader offered a generous price, but Lucius refused, saying he still had other plans for her. The trader accepted his decision and left. As soon as the door slammed shut, Ira approached Lucius again with more odd expressions. He told her it was obvious she was faking madness. He had given her enough time to reflect on her actions. Ira only laughed in response. Lucius declared he would deliver her special punishment in 3 days. Until then, he would treat her as well as possible. He instructed her to prepare herself. 3 days after her arrest, Ira was escorted out of the jail by 2 guards and taken into the castle's lawn. A crowd had already gathered, murmuring and reacting loudly the moment she appeared. As Ira looked around, she told herself she had been worried about some harsh, unknown punishment. But instead, it seemed she was to be paraded publicly with a sign declaring her a thief. She scolded herself silently, thinking she should never have acted irrationally before she could have waited patiently. She intended to reclaim her dignity one day, perhaps even tarnish her accuser's reputation. Clever rumors. Lucius stepped forward, raising his voice to the people. He announced the start of Ira's punishment, explaining that she had committed a crime and needed to face consequences for repentance. If she endured the humiliation and completed the march, the crowd was still expected to treat her as a human being. Then he ordered the guards to bring her forward, removing the fabric that concealed her identity. Ira was stunned by the sudden exposure and the hostile atmosphere around her. Lucius declared that the people were free to express their anger verbally so long as they did not harm her physically. Ira panicked as she realized the situation was worse than she expected. Lucius added that if she collapsed or refused to continue, the entire punishment would begin anew. She tried to protest, but the guards followed his orders strictly. There was a reason the crowd had gathered so eagerly. 3 days earlier, they had read the announcement posted throughout the town describing Ira's crime and the details of her public reprimand. Many misunderstood it as permission to confront her aggressively. Some even spoke among themselves, saying they had never seen anyone like her before, and that she deserved strong condemnation for her supposed betrayal. During the days when Ira had been treated relatively well in custody, Lucius had quietly spread word across neighboring lands, summoning anyone who felt wronged by thieves or betrayal to witness her punishment. Their reactions were unpredictable, and many arrived ready to vent their frustrations on a symbolic offender. Lucius told the crowd that although his methods may appear harsh, Ira had been the one to approach him first with deceit. She had attempted to steal his late father's belongings and pretended to be mentally unstable, even though she had been previously exempted from execution. According to Lucius, Ira had crossed the line numerous times, and this was the inevitable result. As the crowd continued shouting and pushing her forward, Ira grew overwhelmed. Suddenly, Lucius signaled with a sharp whistle, ordering everyone to stop. He reminded them that if she collapsed, the punishment would be restarted, and announced that the rest of the sentence would continue the next day. That night, Ira sought out Lucius in private. She apologized, admitting regret for everything she had done. She promised to follow every instruction he gave if he would end the punishment. Her fear was intensified by the contrast between how she had been treated earlier, almost like an honored guest, and how she was being treated now. In desperation, she asked him not to leave her alone. Lucius reassured her calmly, saying he would guide her and teach her how to rebuild herself from this ordeal. However, next morning, the tense atmosphere was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. A furious man barged into Lucius's castle, demanding to know why Lucius had taken Cieri, a woman from the neighboring territory, along with her parents. As a local lord, he accused Lucius of interfering with his personal authority. Lucius replied sharply that the man had been attempting to harm someone under his protection. He promised financial compensation for the loss, asking whether that would resolve the matter. The man's tone changed instantly. He muttered a few threats, slammed the door, and left, vowing revenge. Moments later, another knock sounded. This time, it was Robin who informed Lucius that the guards had captured a group of bandits. Lucius took his cane and walked with Robin and Cieri toward the lawn. He asked Robin about the punishment for theft under the current law. Robin replied that the sentence was beheading, with the head displayed publicly as a warning. Lucius nodded, confirming that the bandits, by this definition, were sentenced to death. The bandits begged for mercy, but Cieri stepped forward hesitantly. She addressed Lucius, explaining that her faith emphasized forgiveness. Perhaps, she suggested, they might offer the bandits a chance instead of execution. Lucius looked at her carefully, pointing out that she was the same ten-headed farmer's daughter who had pleaded for Ira earlier. Now, she was asking him to spare even thieves. Cieri replied quietly, asking what else she was supposed to do if mercy was the core of what she believed. He realized he couldn't go against Cieri's logic, so he reluctantly agreed, telling her that on second thought, she might be right. Inwardly, he reflected on how he had been thinking only as a landlord and forgetting his responsibility as an archpriest. Cieri smiled, and he found himself thinking that both his image as a priest and the affection Cieri showed him mattered as well. Placing his hand gently on her head, he told her he would reconsider the matter once more. He guessed she liked it when he patted her, but this time he decided he would do something different. The group of bandits came forward, bowing their heads and apologizing to Lucius. They begged him to forgive them and pleaded for one more chance, claiming they wanted to become new people. Lucius thought that at such a moment of apology, he could not easily say anything harsh. They kept expressing regret for their sins, and although he could read their shameless intentions like an open book, he finally agreed. He told them he would give them a house and land, but they must work hard, rebuild themselves, and take part in religious duties. The bandits thanked him earnestly and promised to try their best. Lucius, however, muttered to himself that there was no way these thugs could truly change so easily. He then turned to Cieri and asked her to look after them. He reminded her that they were still connected through her, but he warned her not to make him regret this decision. Resting his hand on her shoulder, he remarked that their relationship was about to change forever. Meanwhile, as expected, the amnesty granted to the thieves quickly became a major issue. When the bandits returned to the village and greeted an old man, he angrily questioned why they had been given houses and farmland. One of the bandits said the person in authority had granted them amnesty and asked whether the old man wanted the reason. The old man protested, saying his lord must have lost his senses to give such a favor to trash. Enraged, the bandits demanded to know who he was calling trash. One of them, known for his temper, stepped forward aggressively. The guards tried to stop the escalating argument, ordering everyone to step back. The bandits insisted they should be left alone since they had already received permission. The old man taunted them further, telling them to bring it on if they weren't scared and demanding that they leave the town at once. Cieri arrived amid the chaos and took it all in. She whispered to herself that everyone seemed to be having a difficult time and blamed herself for causing all this trouble. Sometime later, Lucius headed toward the town, thinking about how both victims and aggressors were forced to exist in the same space and how impossible it would be for them to get along. He arrived at the thieves' hideout and found it exactly as in the game. At the beginning of the game, Lucius was level 40, the boss was level 20, and the boss's pawn was level 10. Standing guard was a man named Carl, his job listed as thief, his power stat at 15, and his talent in guarding and inflicting beatings. Lucius calculated that if the levels here matched the game system, he could handle this alone. For the sake of peace, Lucius struck Carl with his cane, knocking him out. Then, rushing forward, he hit 2 more men, sending them tumbling to the ground. Another man attacked from behind, but Lucius swiftly stepped back, stopped the attack, and struck him with his cane as well. Continuing deeper inside, he encountered more thieves and introduced himself as Lucius, the landlord of Pedaland. When they mentioned that 3 of their group had surrendered recently, Lucius cut them off, insisting they not interrupt him while he was speaking. One of the thieves asked if Lucius needed a favor, and another enthusiastically asked what it might be, promising to do anything for him. Lucius ordered them to threaten the 3 bandits, forcing them to sell their houses and return to the hideout. If they succeeded, and if they left Saori alone, he would spare their lives and never pursue them again. The thieves agreed eagerly, promising to do their best. But by the next evening, the thieves betrayed him. When Lucius arrived, they pretended to be surprised, asking why he had come. He told them plainly that they had betrayed him. Without hesitation, he killed them and returned home, after which he ordered the knights to dispose of their bodies. Back in his room, he stood by the window, hoping that Saori would realize something important from all this. Just then, there was a knock at the door, and Saori's voice sounded from outside asking if she could come in. He allowed her to enter. Seeing him, she immediately asked if he was all right, explaining that she had rushed here as soon as she heard he had fought with the thieves. He told her that the bandits had tried to run away, so he had gone to persuade them, but they attempted to kill him. He added that he had only tried to help them because he had taken her advice to heart. Saori blamed herself and apologized tearfully. Lucius told her that he was exhausted and asked whether she would comfort him. She promised and said she would do anything for him. He thanked her softly and asked her to sit beside him. After she sat beside him, Lucius found himself quietly expressing his feelings for her, holding back, careful not to reveal too much. The next morning, he sat at his desk, muttering to himself that he was trying his best to restrain his desires. A sudden knock interrupted his thoughts. A voice came from the other side of the door. "It's Robin." Lucius allowed him to enter. Robin stepped in, his expression anxious, and informed him that something grave had occurred. The Demon King was expected to rise again soon. Lucius acknowledged the gravity of the news and instructed Robin to prepare the knights for deployment. Under the table nearby, Ira was already going through her small exercise routine, while Lucius reminded himself that he had an overwhelming amount of work to manage. Robin assured him that preparations would be made immediately and explained that before the Demon King's resurrection, monsters were likely to become far more active. Although Lucius possessed the power to confront and kill the Demon King directly, he knew that leaving his land unattended could invite neighboring feudal lords to seize the opportunity and cause trouble. For that reason, he decided that the warriors would handle the Demon King while he focused on protecting his own territory. Soon after, Lucius went out and engaged a pack of monsters. The creatures attacked ferociously, but he withstood their assault and defeated them with Robin fighting at his side. As the days passed, the situation only intensified. After the Demon King's resurrection, Lucius spent an entire month eliminating monsters within his borders. Eventually, he remarked that the problem seemed almost under control, and Robin agreed, suggesting that the knights should withdraw. Robin, despite being level 20, often demonstrated strength beyond someone at level 30. Lucius himself, now level 36, possessed abilities stronger than many who had reached level 45. He suggested they return for now and let the others rest before resuming their duties. Robin obeyed and offered to prepare a wagon for the journey back. Lucius admitted that, aside from the satisfaction of leveling up, the constant battles were wearing everyone down. Endless physical labor had exhausted them, and he hoped the wagon would carry them back to the mansion quickly, and fatigue weighed heavily on him. During their ride, the wagon came to an abrupt halt. Lucius asked what had happened, but before anyone could answer, a chilling voice echoed through the air. A girl stood in front of them, gripping Robin by the hair. Robin begged her to hold on, his voice trembling. Lucius rushed forward, striking her with a wooden stick and knocking her to the ground, though he noted she was still alive. As he ran toward her, another figure emerged. Lucius recognized the face immediately. He knew this man, this infuriatingly familiar warrior. It was Ai, the protagonist of the game itself, now standing before him in reality. Lucius remarked that he already knew this troublesome man. If the events were following the original game's storyline, the hero should have met him only after gathering 15 people in his party. Yet now he traveled with only a single elf companion. To Lucius, this meant the hero's goal was to clear the game as quickly as possible. It also suggested that both the hero and the elf were far stronger than they should be at this point. making Lucius uneasy because in his current state, he might actually lose if he fought them. As Robin hurried toward the commotion, he saw the hero and his companion in the middle of a heated clash. The girl, whose name was Irina, angrily demanded how dare Lucius attack her, accusing him of siding with the Demon King. Lucius wondered aloud whether he genuinely had no choice but to fight them. Before anything escalated, the elf Aye intervened and called out for Irina to stop. He quickly apologized to Lucius, addressing him respectfully as Lord, and introduced himself properly as Aye. He also introduced the girl as Princess Irina of Ahildern. Irina, however, looked down on Lucius and insulted him, calling him a lowly half-elf and ordering him to kneel before the princess. Lucius, ignoring her contempt, simply asked the hero why they had come all the way here. Irina, offended that he dared ignore her, shouted again, but Aye silenced her once more. Aye then explained that they needed to receive the relic of the former hero from Lucius as it was necessary to defeat the Demon King. Lucius thought for a moment and agreed to give the relic, but asked whether he could request a small favor in return. Aye admitted that defeating the Demon King was urgent, but Irina immediately began insulting Lucius again. She questioned how someone as pathetic as he had become a feudal lord, and insisted he had no right to ask for anything. He should hand the relic over without complaint. Aye begged her once again to calm down. Lucius observed the two of them and thought they looked good together. He secretly hoped the hero would marry her, discover the difference in their life expectancies, and drown in despair. Pushing those thoughts aside, he explained the favor. The oppressive presence of nearby monsters was placing the citizens in anguish, so he asked the hero to help block them off for 3 days to buy time for him to recover his army. Aye reluctantly agreed, saying he had no other choice, though Irina continued muttering complaints. Lucius knew from the original game that the elf princess would eventually run away from home. Later, Lucius returned to his castle and spent the time performing a cardio session with Ira. 3 days passed. When Ai and Irina returned to the castle, Lucius praised them both for their hard work. He instructed Robin to escort them to the relic. Robin agreed and politely guided them through the castle until they reached the room where the relic rested on a table. All of them froze in surprise at the relic once wielded by the former warrior who had defeated the Demon King. Irina criticized the sight immediately. According to her, Lucius had stored the relic among random trash, treating it with disrespect. She went on to declare that Lucius had been so unskilled that he could not even protect his own village. Lucius demanded she stop, but continued, insulting him for failing to serve his guests properly. She said he must have done it because he was a lowly half-elf. Lucius responded by asking whether she felt no shame in insulting the son of a man who had fought alongside the former hero to defeat the Demon King. He remarked that her late father would surely be pleased by her behavior now. Aye, alarmed that Lucius was truly getting angry, begged Irina to stop and apologized once again. Lucius refused Ai's apology, insisting that she take responsibility for her own words. Enraged, Irina accused Lucius of using her father's memory against her, insulting her in front of her subordinate, and even striking Robert out of discrimination. She claimed she had no patience left and challenged Lucius, declaring that she would kneel to him if he managed to win. Lucius considered this and added a condition of his own. If she lost, she would stay out of the hero's party. Irina was shocked, but before she could argue, Ai voiced his own concern that if Lucius won, he might force himself into their party. Lucius merely replied that after he was gone, he would entrust the land to the princess. Irina countered with her own condition that if she won, Lucius must gather all the people of the land, strip himself, bow before her, and apologize publicly. Lucius accepted calmly and told her to prepare herself and follow him. She scoffed, claiming victory was obvious, and demanded to know why she should prepare. Lucius smiled and told her not to be embarrassed if she ended up crying. After some time, the group moved toward the lawn where the duel was set to take place. Aye announced he would referee the battle. Irina stated that the side which forfeited or lost consciousness first would be declared the loser. Lucius added that the outcome of the duel would determine how both the winner and the loser would proceed, according to the promises they had made earlier. He then asked Irina if she had anything to add. Irina replied that she did. She had almost forgotten. She declared that she would rout Lucius so that he would not even be able to eat afterwards. Aye, hearing this, signaled that the duel might begin. As soon as the signal was given, Lucius rushed toward her with his cane, thinking for a moment whether she would fire or cast a spell. She did not, and her speed surprised him. The djinn within Irina lent her incredible strength, yet Lucius still made her attacks ineffective. Irina taunted him, asking whether he truly believed someone like him could get close to her. Lucius responded by invoking blessings that increased his endurance, attack power, and defensive speed. Then he launched a violent assault with his cane, striking her repeatedly until she fell. The djinn within Erina protested in her mind, and in the chaos, her djinn bracelet slipped away. Lucius mocked her, asking if she was done displaying cowardice and demanding she come closer. Erina attempted to speak, but he silenced her sharply. Placing a hand on his head, he declared that the duel must continue until a proper conclusion was reached. Erina realized that without her djinn barrier, she would have to rely solely on her bare hands. Lucius struck again, this time with his hands, and she collapsed completely. He reminded her of her earlier boast that she would prevent him from eating. At that moment, Aye rushed in and ordered him to stop, addressing him as Lord and urging him to let her go. He questioned Lucius, asking whether the outcome of the duel was worth such brutality and how he could treat a woman that way. Lucius released her, and Erina fell to the ground. Aye checked if she was all right. Lucius, however, demanded that Aye step back, calling him a hero and asking why he was involving himself in the middle of a sacred duel. He insisted that Erina had struck his subordinate, discriminated against him, insulted him before others, and even insulted his father. For Lucius, this duel was not merely a fight, it was a matter of honor. For his father, for his subordinate, and for himself. He questioned why he should show deference simply because she was a woman. He added that if hitting her had not been allowed, he would not have agreed to the duel in the first place. Both had consented, yet a winner still had not been decided. Erina remained lying on the ground, and Lucius concluded that he had won. He then took her back to the castle. There, Erina apologized for her rudeness and explained that she would temporarily govern Peta in his place. Lucius acknowledged that she had kept her word. Erina agreed, adding that she had not sworn on her honor as a princess and that it was only right for the stronger person to go to the Demon King. She produced a tube of medicine and handed it to him, explaining that it was an emergency recovery medicine from the Elf Kingdom and asking him to use it if Aye ever got hurt. Lucius nodded, wondering what sort of medicine it was. There had been nothing like it in the game he knew, but it did not matter, since she would not be using it on the hero anyway. The forbidden medicine, concentrated with secret ingredients, had a powerful effect on men. Lucius then declared that he would become part of his own party, defeat the Demon King, and kill the hero. Before Erina could respond, he told her to wait. He had something he wanted to teach her. The next day, a man whom Lucius privately referred to as that bastard came to meet him. He informed Lord Lucius that he had come after seeing the public notice. Standing beside him was a young man who introduced himself politely as Aa, the hero. The priest, whom Lucius mistrusted, praised Aa's efforts, declaring that the hero was working extremely hard for the sake of defeating the Demon King. Lucius, however, reminded him that the notice was merely an announcement that the hero would pass through the feudal lands, as it was the quickest route. Yet the priest behaved as if he shared some special bond with him. Acting overly familiar, the man offered his help in finding a surrogate for the hero, claiming he had already arranged one and could easily assist if needed. Lucius immediately understood the priest's intentions, especially regarding Ciare, and curtly replied that he already had a surrogate. The priest looked troubled and asked whether Lucius had chosen someone for knightly order, particularly Orsieri, reminding him that the rules demanded the surrogate be at least a baron. Lucius then stated calmly that the Princess of Children currently served as the hero's surrogate, so there was nothing to worry about. They were simply too busy to entertain other arrangements. He recognized that the priest might have spoken out of concern, but even so, he had clearly overstepped. Lucius then advised Aye not to trust people merely because they appeared kind on the surface. Aye commented that Lucius sounded cold, yet he insisted he still preferred believing in people. Lucius replied dryly that if Aye had been a woman, someone would have surely taken advantage of that trusting nature, most likely whispering that he should just trust them while lying beside them in bed. I sighed, saying their conversation would never end at this rate and that continuing it was hardly worth the effort. In the original game, Lucius recalled, the Golden Sun feudal lord was notorious for exploiting any woman connected to the hero, whether she was part of his party, his employer, or even simply near the employer. His reputation was terrible because he had preyed on many women, and now, since he seemed determined to pursue Ciari again, Lucius believed he should have killed the feudal lord the moment he had the chance. A few days later, outside the decaying Golden Sun estate, Lucius and Aa came across several goblins tormenting a girl and attempting something vile. Aa immediately rushed forward, attacking the creatures without hesitation. He shouted that they must have thought they could take advantage of the weak, but he would kill every one of them. Lucius was taken aback by the strength of Aa's first throw. The goblins screeched, attack, and charged. AA met them head-on, competing in speed and power, cutting them down one after another with firm resolve. One of the goblins managed to reach Lucius. He remarked to himself that AA was practically making stir-fried goblins out of them, while he himself felt like he was doing nothing at all. Lucius swiftly killed the creature and muttered that he had been thinking of making Irina fall into NTR with him after killing the hero, a thought he kept only half seriously. When the battle ended, IA hurried over, asking if he was all right. Lucius assured him he was fine. He admitted inwardly that he had grown strangely fond of the hero now that they had eaten together, slept in the same camps, and fought side by side. AI observed that it hadn't been long since the victims had died. He wished he had arrived more quickly. Lucius commented again on how good-hearted he was, even on top of everything else. He confessed quietly to himself that he had originally planned to kill the hero as soon as they defeated the Demon King. Suddenly, AA sensed something ahead and pointed in the direction of a concentrated, sinister energy, the Demon King's presence. Lucius suggested they find a concealed spot nearby and camp there before moving forward. They built a small fire and settled down. While staring at the flames, Lucius remarked that everything would be over once AA killed the Demon King. He asked whether the hero intended to marry the princess afterwards. AA answered sincerely that he did, because he truly loved Irina. Lucius hesitated, wondering if he could really kill someone this genuinely kind. Before he could reflect further, monsters emerged from the darkness. AA warned him not to get hurt, and Lucius returned the concern. They fought together, defeating the monsters one by one. Then, IA noticed something else approaching. A powerful figure stepped forward, Pilkios. He introduced himself as the hero, clearly mocking them. Lucius recognized him immediately. Pilkios, one of the 4 heavenly kings. He was the opposite of the hero, boasting immense resistance and formidable strength. Lucius told IA to fall back, but IA didn't hesitate. He charged straight at Pilkios and killed him outright, leaving Lucius stunned. It was at that moment that Lucius finally decided the hero deserved to live. IA was simply too generous. IA brushed off the fight, saying the enemy wasn't a big deal, and urged them to keep going. Name IA, level 46, job hero, strength 160, agility 138, intelligence 98, and luck 120. And now, standing just ahead of them, the Demon King awaited. Lucius and IA ran together through the forest, and Lucius quietly muttered to himself that it seemed the hero had slain far too many monsters while taking the shortcut. The hero had grown absurdly strong, and Lucius reflected that, now that he thought about it, it was better this way. It wasn't because Lucius was a coward. Instead, if IA returned alive as the only hero who defeated the Demon King, he would become overwhelmed by endless ceremonies and events. And since the hero's heart was set solely on Irina, who, in Lucius's opinion, possessed an awful personality, Lucius felt free to claim the rest of the charming female characters for himself. When they finally reached the eerie clearing, Aya announced that he could feel the energy of the demon knight emanating from just ahead, and urged Lucius to prepare their weapons. Lucius told the hero he would leave the Demon King to him, while he took care of everything else. Ai nodded earnestly, asking Lucius to cover him as best he could. Lucius, however, could not shake the feeling that everyone here must have already been sacrificed, victims of both the wicked feudal lord and the Demon King, the actual final boss of this twisted world. Deep down, he wondered if he himself was truly ready to face them. The wicked feudal lord soon appeared, standing tall at level 25, demanding to know who dared enter his domain. The Demon King's pre-resurrection form at level 33 loomed behind him. Ai remarked that they looked powerful and asked the priest to be careful. The hero and the priest, Aa and Lucius, were both level 46, prepared for the fight. Lucius urged the hero to focus on defeating the Demon King while he handled the rest. With a furious command, the evil lord ordered his monsters to attack and bring him the heads of the intruders. The creatures lunged at them, and Lucius and Ia cut them down one by one. Shocked by their strength, the wicked lord cried out that he had been wrong and begged to be spared. But Lucius declared that he could never forgive someone who treated human lives so carelessly, and with cold resolve, he struck him down. The Demon King fell soon after, and Lucius murmured that it was surprising to see the resurrection fail, remembering the promise he had made to Evangeline. As the battle settled, the wicked lord, in his final moments, told Aa that he would take the hero's lover with him to the afterlife. Lucius snapped that Aa was not his lover, but before he could say more, the lord launched a desperate attack at Lucius. Aa shoved him aside, taking the full blow himself. Lucius exclaimed that he could have handled the attack, then rushed to Aa's side. He pressed healing fabric against the wound and whispered a healing spell. Still nothing happened. Panic struck him until his mind flashed to the forbidden medicine, a potent recovery drug infused with a dangerous secret, known to have more powerful effects on men. Snatching the tube Irina had given him, he poured the medicine into EA's mouth. Moments later, the hero gasped awake and in astonishment announced that he was alive. He thanked Lucius for saving him, but Lucius told him to blame the princess instead. Confused, EA asked what he meant by blame, and Lucius explained that he had used the medicine given by the princess to save him, but the side effects were severe. In an instant, EA's body shifted, his physique transforming completely into that of a girl. The system message appeared that special trait, gender bender, and gender changed due to a side effect. Lucius could not help but smile, remarking that at least the princess would be happy that AA survived. But AA protested, saying he could not marry Irina now. As a princess, she needed to continue her royal bloodline, and there was nothing he could do to help her in his new state. Lucius assured him that, for the sake of the comrade who had fought at his side through life and death, he would protect the hero's beloved for him. AA accepted his concern and told him he truly was a good person. Lucius, however, privately dreaded how difficult it would be to convince the hero to allow him to NTR her. When they returned to the castle, the annoying steward, who was often called the bastard, appeared and was startled to see Lord Lucius return safely. He asked about Aya's whereabouts and the identity of the girl beside him. Before Aya could speak, Lucius answered that the hero had returned to his hometown and that the young woman was his sister. The steward, smiling suspiciously, remarked that it was late and suggested they stay at the castle for the night. Lucius found his expression infuriating, as if the man believed he was hiding another man's woman. Yet Lucius politely replied that they would be grateful. Inwardly, he hardened his resolve. He would not forgive the steward. One day, he would kill him. That night, they stayed in the castle, their rooms positioned directly across from one another. Before retiring, Ai told Lucius that he would see him in the morning. Lucius entered his own chamber, lay down on the bed, and reflected on the exceptional hospitality they had received and the splendid dinner served to them. He opened his status window several times, half expecting something suspicious, yet to his surprise, there was no trace of poison at all. The food had been rated as a level 9 brilliant pork roast. Nothing more. Bastard. The Golden Sun had earlier insisted that he merely wished to treat them out of goodwill. Lucius realized he had misunderstood and suspected the man of plotting something against the hero. He apologized inwardly for the suspicion, knowing the misconception was not entirely Bastard's fault. While he was drifting between thoughts, Lucius suddenly heard a noise. Grabbing his staff, he stepped out of his room and followed the sound to Ia's door. When he pushed it open, he caught Bastard red-handed inside. Lucius demanded to know what they were doing and struck the intruder with his staff. Startled, tried to address him as Mr. Priest, attempting to calm the situation. Lucius insisted that the man had been about to pounce on Ia. Bastard panicked, confused, and terrified. While Lucius rebuked him, saying he had acted too hastily, he should at least have waited until the door was unlocked. Lucius's mind worked quickly. The hero was incapable of lying, and the situation felt like the presence of some twisted NTR-like curse. Yet he had no concrete evidence and had not caught Bastard in the act. If Bastard claimed he had simply been standing in front of the door, it would be difficult to prove otherwise. In his panic, Bastard confessed that he had been wrong and swore he would never try to force himself on a woman again. Later that night, Lucius struck him down, ending the matter before it could become worse. By the next morning, a murder investigation was already underway. The Commander-Knight, overseeing the inquiry, expressed disbelief, stating that it was unthinkable that Bastard would commit such a crime against a woman. Lucius and AA only responded that they had not said anything to mislead the investigation. The commander apologized, explaining that he had to send the report to the kingdom and could not personally see them off. With that, the investigation was formally closed. As they departed, Lucius muttered in frustration, wondering what that Golden Sun buffoon had truly been like before this, and regretting that he had not killed him sooner. Ai remarked that killing a man is hardly enough punishment for someone who covets another's woman. After that, they continued their journey toward Peta. Upon arriving, Lucius informed AA that they had reached their destination. AA thanked him and acknowledged how hard Lucius had worked. Yet his mind was troubled. He was anxious about how Irina would react when she saw him in his current state. The gates opened for Lord Lucius, and upon entering, he decided it would be best to explain everything to the princess immediately. Together, he and AA recounted the entire chain of events. Irina dismissed it at first, calling them nonsense and asking whether they took her for a fool. She insisted that the woman before her was not AA. Lucius replied firmly that she truly was the hero. Irina stared at AA with disbelief, still refusing to accept it. AA spoke gently, telling her it was indeed him, reminding her of the day they had first met when two orcs attacked them. Recognition dawned on Irina's face, and she rushed forward to embrace him. She expressed her relief that he was alive, but demanded to know why he had become like this. Lucius explained that the side effect of the medicine she had given him was that the potion had revived the hero, but it had also transformed him into a woman. Irina was stunned. She questioned how a medicine could have such a drastic effect. IA then asked whether the Elven Kingdom possessed any drug capable of turning a woman back into a man. Irina admitted there was probably no such medicine, yet promised to search for one. AA declared he would scour the entire continent for a cure as well. Irina reminded him of their promise to marry after he defeated the Demon King. When he stepped closer, she asked in a trembling voice whether he intended to abandon her. IA reassured her that he loved her and would marry her no matter what. Since she was a princess and needed an heir, he promised he would return to being a man as soon as possible. Hearing this, Irina nodded, finally understanding. Lucius prepared to depart, telling her to stay well. He added that he might trouble her for a few more days. II addressed her respectfully one last time, and then he was gone. A week passed after the hero's departure. During that time, Irina and Lucius often shared drinks. One evening, she asked whether Lucius had experienced any discomfort while staying there. She lamented that AA was working so hard, which made it impossible for her to feel at ease. She was in constant torment. Lucius expressed sympathy, saying it was unfortunate that there was no way for her to conceive a child elsewhere, then the hero would not need to risk his life. She was startled by the suggestion. He insisted that AA would not die easily, and that she was taking his words too literally. She asked whether Lucius truly meant to obtain a child from someone else. He told her that there existed a man equally strong and respected as AA. Shocked, Irina demanded whether such a man would give her his protein shake and then simply step aside once she and AA were married. No kind of man could be that selfless. Lucius questioned why her expression had changed so suddenly. Irina realized he was referring to the former hero's only son. Lucius was also surprised. A man from the hero's own party who had once saved the world. She wondered what Lucius was imagining. He argued that being Lord of Peta and a priest was already quite significant. She protested, though not entirely sure of her own objections. Lucius reminded her that this was a chance to save the hero easily and asked why she hesitated. When she faltered, he suggested she did not truly mean it when she swore she loved IA. She shouted at him to be quiet, insisting she would do anything for IA. Seeing how intoxicated she was, Lucius remarked that they could simply say she acted this way because of her drunkenness. But Irina told him to wait and stay still. Lucius stepped closer and told her to prove she was willing to do anything for the hero because she was about to do something for him right now. That night, Lucius approached Irina with the same relentless determination he always carried. Irina, already tense, told him that he needed to corner the heroes only when they were drunk. Otherwise, they would start thinking clearly and making rational decisions. But Lucius never listened. She warned him again, telling him to keep his face away from hers so the situation wouldn't escalate any further. Lucius ignored her words and let his fingers brush against the fabric of her clothing. He reminded her that she was fully aware of the current arrangement, addressing her mockingly as princess. Everything he did, he claimed, was for the sake of the hero. If that was the case, he said, wouldn't it be better for both of them to finish quickly? It was, to him, a simple matter. He even asked whether she intended to enjoy it, which only provoked her further. Irina retorted that the idea was ridiculous and insisted that it was nothing but business. Lucius responded that her attitude made it even more apparent that she should simply stay still. After their bitter exchange, Lucius forced her into another one of his so-called cardio sessions, leaving Irina once again trapped in the cruelty she had come to expect from him. Meanwhile, far away, Ai sat alone with a piece of parchment and a trembling hand. He had just finished writing a letter for Irina and wondered aloud whether he should read it through one more time. In the letter, he explained that he had come to the great trading city of Estar, where he was searching for a drug that could restore him to his original form as a man. He hoped she would understand his intentions, for everything he did came from a heart that longed to return and marry her as soon as possible. He wrote about the jewelry boxes that were currently the latest trend in the trading district, and mentioned that he planned to buy one for her, something special for the moment he finally came back. As he neared the end of the letter, he could not hold back his emotions. Tears fell onto the page as he confessed his love for her once again. The next day, Irina sat quietly and read Aye's letter. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered that she loved him too and missed him more than he could ever imagine. Lucius, observing her reaction, remarked that the hero's letter was rather touching. He suggested she return to her kingdom and begin preparing for her wedding to Aye. Irina wiped her tears and said she would try to persuade everyone to allow the marriage, especially since she was probably pregnant. Her plan, she explained, was to convince Aye that the child had been conceived by magic. Lucius agreed with a cold certainty in his voice, noting that the hero would likely believe such a story. Irina added that she also wanted to ask Lucius about the Demon King, because something else had happened. Lucius answered that the Demon King had apparently made a promise to someone named Evangeline. Irina stared at him, shocked. She demanded to know why he had not told her something so important. Lucius looked confused and asked who Evangeline even was. Irina shot him a glare and called him ignorant. Evangeline, she explained, was the first woman ever recorded in history, an influential figure who had summoned a demon onto the land for the very first time. Lucius brushed aside the significance and said it would still be helpful for her kingdom to know. Irina, meanwhile, could not shake off the fear forming in her heart. Evangeline, someone even more terrifying, was never mentioned in any of the records, not even in the game world she remembered. In the game, everything ended once the Demon King was defeated. The only thing close to his level of fear came from the sea, but Irina took a breath and consoled herself that it had nothing to do with their current situation. Lucius had no reason to ever travel to the sea, but even as she tried to reassure herself, a ship was already sailing across the open waters. On board, the crew had captured Aye. A woman approached him, looking down with a mixture of curiosity and authority. She confirmed his name, and Aye nodded, pleading with her for mercy. She told him she understood and said she would call the person in charge. She paused, trying to recall his name. Aye, frightened, whispered that it was Peta Lucius, the chief priest of the Protestant church. The woman turned to the sailors and instructed them to bring him immediately. The next day, Irina departed for the elf kingdom, leaving Lucius alone with his thoughts. He reflected on the feudal lord of the Golden Sun territory, believing he could finally understand the man and perhaps forgive him, even though the lord had already passed away. While Lucius pondered, a knock echoed at the door. A voice called out respectfully, announcing that it was Sierri and that she had brought him a letter. Lucius permitted her to enter. Handing him the letter, she explained that it had arrived from Esta. Hearing the name Port Esta, Lucius felt a dark chill. In the original game, that place had been notorious for its brutality. There, a woman commanded the pirate forces to kill the men and wrestle the women, and it was known as the dwelling place of Eve, an individual powerful enough to rival even the Demon King. Eve captured women, kidnapped them, confined them, broke their spirits, and transformed them into her subordinates. Lucius murmured that he would never set foot in that cursed place in this life. Yet the ominous letter in his hand had already sent goosebumps racing across his skin. Before he could open it, a dagger seemed to fly toward his chest, the shock of the moment startling him. Sierri watched his troubled expression and gently asked if he was busy, adding that he seemed to be having a difficult day. Her likability toward him was already at 100, and Lucius wondered if she might help him unwind. He agreed that he was indeed busy and could use the help. Soon after, the two began their strenuous cardio session. When they finished, Lucius thanked her for assisting him and asked her to hurry and read the letter aloud. Sierri unfolded the message and began, "To the feudal lord, Lucius Peta. False rumors regarding a drug that enhances one's level have been spreading in the trading city of Esta. The hero has been captured by the pirate Eve while investigating the matter. For negotiations concerning his release, Eve has chosen to deal with feudal lord Lucius." Lucius muttered irritably that he was the one who knew the hero best, and the hero obviously belonged to him. If he delayed, would Eve turn the hero into a woman first? Taking the letter from Sierri, he asked her to prepare a protein shake while he thought things through. Since the royal palace had dispatched a temporary head to oversee the land of Peta, Lucius realized there was no choice left but to venture to Esta himself. With resignation, he accepted his fate. 2 days later, they arrived at the port city of Esta. As soon as they docked, the men disembarked, and an expedition force and a ship were immediately assembled. Among them was a deacon, someone whom Eve had personally requested to be delivered alive. Had she not asked for him, the group would have beaten the man senseless on the spot. Lucius ordered the pirate ship forward and commanded everyone to prepare for battle. Soon, Lucius and Eve confronted each other face to face. Eve declared that since she had tested the hero now belonged to her. Lucius felt disgusted that, to him, Eve was nothing more than an NTR parasite trying to steal what was his. He had no intention of engaging with such a person, yet he decided to at least attempt a civilized conversation. Introducing herself, Eve confirmed he was Lucius Petta and listed her abilities, checked the statistics, and was blessed by the mermaids. Her stats doubled whenever she was on the sea or underwater. Lucius compared her status to his own, matching all the statistics and possessing the special traits of a two-way Inquisitor assaulter. Eve remarked that countless perverts came to this island believing false rumors about some special drug that could enhance their desires, only to end up beaten by her. She added that she had heard he was a priest. Lucius replied that he was not good at reading people and insisted that someone as pure and celibate as he was could never engage in such behavior. He also confirmed that he had not laid a hand on the captive hero, Ia. Eve reminded him that she had promised to release the hero only after hearing his response. Then she asked bluntly who Ia's lover was. Lucius answered truthfully. It was Irina, the princess of Ahildern. Eve seemed genuinely impressed. If Irina truly was a princess, she said, she had been planning to let Ia go if only Lucius could prove it. But she abruptly changed her mind. When Lucius asked what she meant, Eve told him to summon the princess to Esta. She insisted that she wished to meet Irina at least once in her life. Lucius was shocked, but Eve continued coldly. She instructed him to pick any one sailor to return with her, and that she intended to kill every other person present except for Lucius and that one survivor. Lucius immediately ordered his men to prepare for attack. Eve called him insane, and with that, the fierce battle between them erupted. Chaos erupted across the ship as the two sides clashed fiercely, the sound of shattering objects echoing through the corridors. Lucius and Eve glared at each other with burning hostility, each questioning how the situation had escalated so far. Lucius demanded to know what kind of overwhelming strength Eve possessed, astonished by the force she displayed. Eve's crew, filled with fury, urged her to kill him without hesitation. Eve responded coldly that she would come for Lucius only after she had cut down all of his subordinates, instructing him to wait for his turn simply. Lucius warned her sharply that she would die the moment she stepped toward him, telling her to keep that in mind. The girls from her gang shouted at Lucius to stop provoking her, calling him priest as they tried to hold the situation together. But Eve had already launched herself into combat, cutting down the men around her one after another. In the midst of the chaos, one of the girls rushed toward Lucius and attempted to attack him directly. He blocked her blow with his cane, holding her back with a composed expression. She explained desperately that if they could not restrain Eve, then all of them would eventually be slaughtered by her hands. They had been captured and forced into becoming pirates, and now even their lives seemed close to ending. Lucius replied calmly that if that was the case, then he would simply kill Eve himself and save the girl. He told them to release the hero standing nearby. If the hero cast buffs on everyone, then together they might be able to stand a chance. However, the girls insisted it was impossible. They could never defeat Eve head-on. They warned that things would become far more troublesome if Eve appeared on that floor now. Lucius looked around at the suddenly silent ship and wondered aloud whether most of the pirates had already been killed. Realizing there was no time left, he struck the girls with quick blows from his cane and ordered everyone to stop. Then he approached the hero and assured him that he had come specifically to rescue him. Lucius broke the chains binding the hero and asked if he would be able to fight Eve, since she would undoubtedly arrive soon. As the hero's wounds healed and his stats rose, Ia confidently responded that yes, he was ready, and suggested that they should fight together. He mentioned that he had come up with a good idea. Lucius raised an eyebrow and asked what the idea was. AA explained that there was a mermaid imprisoned on the lowest floor of the ship, someone the pirate Eve held dear. He offered to buy Lucius time so the priest could go down, locate the mermaid, and take her hostage. With that leverage, Lucius might be able to escape safely. Lucius repeated the word mermaid in surprise, but understood the strategy. He asked if IA would truly be all right on his own. IA nodded confidently, saying that he believed he would be fine, especially since Eve seemed to desire his body more than anything. Before Lucius could respond further, Eve burst into the area with incredible speed. IA urged Lucius to hurry, calling him Mr. Priest. Lucius promised he would return shortly. Eve glared at IA, saying that if she had known events would unfold like this, she would have done something to him earlier. IA replied that this time things would be different, emphasizing that he didn't need raw strength to fight her. Eve warned him that if she caught him again, he would be forced to become a permanent pirate comrade. With that threat hanging in the air, II braced himself and told her Here he go, and their battle will resume. Meanwhile, Lucius descended to the lowest part of the ship. There, inside a water tank, he found the mermaid AA. He pulled her out carefully and examined her with confusion. He wondered aloud what kind of love Eve supposedly had for this creature. In what world did it appear that Eve loved this mermaid? None of this matched the events of the original game. He remembered there had been no mermaid at all. The mermaid stirred slightly, struggling weakly. Lucius told her to stay still so he could free her. He cut the ropes binding her, and she seemed to relax for a moment. But as he checked her condition, he froze and whispered, shocked, asking whether she was already dead. Suddenly, a mermaid struck Lucius across the body with her tail, sending a sharp shock through him. He stepped back in surprise, realizing just how strong and fast she was. As he tried to steady himself, he thought that this character had never existed in the original story. There had never been another mermaid besides Eve, who was only a half mermaid. The mermaid glared at him and asked if he had ever been addicted to something. Lucius, still astonished, muttered that his only addiction was the status window. She ignored his answer and began speaking bitterly. She explained that humans had violently slaughtered mermaids, believing they could create aphrodisiacs from their bodies. Many humans had even castrated the men and wrestled the women who wandered into mermaid territory. Her status soon appeared before Lucius. Name Selu level 34, species is mermaid, her strength 110, her agility is 120, intelligence is 120, and luck is 78. Special traits are fish detection, blessing of the mermaid, water transportation, all stats doubled on water. Lucius examined the numbers and admitted to himself that most mermaids would be far too weak to survive encounters like this. Selu, however, was abnormally strong. Yet he also sensed that her actions had moved beyond revenge. She confirmed this suspicion when she declared that she now enjoyed murdering humans. Lucius warned her that her strength still did not match his. Their battle resumed immediately, and Selu demonstrated exceptional combat skill. Lucius realized that the blessing of the mermaid, which doubled all her stats on and underwater, was practically a cheat skill. Selu then asked him if he had ever been addicted to killing before. Lucius responded by striking her violently with his cane. The blow sent her crashing to the floor. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ship, AA and Eve were locked in their own fierce fight. Eve taunted him, insisting that he would lose again like last time, so she could not understand why he was putting up such a struggle. She launched a relentless series of attacks, but AA muttered that he only needed to counter her with the same power he had used before. Still, he remembered how she had endured and even deflected that attack back then. Suddenly, AA charged violently, catching Eve off guard. She wondered how he had become so strong so quickly. His status revealed the reason. Name IA, level 48, condition currently in use. Effect is all stats temporarily increased. Source is Priest Lucius. He continued hitting her with surprising force. Eve, startled by his improvement, admitted he was quite skilled. Downstairs, her mother, the head of the mermaids, had arrived and was preparing to tear apart the priest before rushing upstairs. IA admitted nervously that he was not himself. At that moment, Lucius walked in, dragging the defeated mermaid with him. Eve froze. "Mom," she whispered. Fury rose inside her and she shouted at Lucius, demanding that he release her mother. She threatened to shred the entire boat and take the fight underwater if he refused. Lucius tightened his grip around the mermaid's neck. Eve warned him to step back and asked what he thought he was doing. He simply replied that he was going to hit her mother with his cane. Terrified, Eve sprinted toward him, but AA shoved her to the floor before she could reach him. She fell hard and accused him furiously, calling him a coward for putting his foot on her. Lucius smiled coldly and told her to look. Eve demanded to know whether he truly wanted a stalemate instead of negotiation. Soon after, they restrained Eve completely. Lucius then decided it was time to return and began heading toward Esta with the others. As they traveled, an announcement echoed that they would soon arrive at their destination. He felt that everything was finally over. They had captured the dangerous Eve, subdued the mermaid, and rescued the hero. Even the pirates, who had been forced into labor, now regained their freedom. Lucius reflected on the cruelty humans inflicted on mermaids, extracting their blood to make aphrodisiacs. Eve argued that they captured mermaids and committed terrible acts against them, and what she and her mother had done was only a small revenge. She begged him desperately to spare her mother. Humans, she said, would kill her mother, draw her blood, and wrestle her. Lucius reassured her not to worry, explaining that her mother would not be killed or drained of blood. Eve, relieved, thanked him and said it was exactly what she expected from a priest. Still, she hesitated and asked if nothing bad would happen to her mother, right? As soon as they reached Esta, the group continued toward the castle by cart. Along the way, Eve hesitantly asked her mother whether Evangeline's words might have been true. Her mother replied that wiping out the entire human population served no purpose. There was no end to such destructive ideas. Lucius then turned to Evangeline's companion, the mermaid, and asked if she could tell him more about her. The mermaid explained that there was not much to tell, so speaking about Evangeline should not have been difficult. However, she added that Evangeline was usually covered entirely in clothing and always wore a mask, making it impossible for her to reveal anything specific. Lucius, confused, asked what she meant. The mermaid repeated that she could not tell him and wondered aloud what was wrong with herself. She had only been trying to speak. Eve, equally puzzled, asked her what the problem was, and the mermaid admitted she did not even know what species Evangeline belonged to. She only knew that Evangeline was a woman who could not speak. As her confusion grew, she reminded Eve not to tire her mother with meaningless talk. Lucius concluded that it must be magical prohibition, a spell that prevented written words, drawings, or even gestures that might reveal information. He only knew one thing with certainty, that Evangeline was an exceptionally powerful witch. Before long, they arrived at the castle. Robin came out to greet them and told Lucius he had worked hard. Lucius replied that he had managed to capture 2 criminals and asked whether anything had happened during his absence. Robin assured him that the temporary head had handled things well, so nothing significant had occurred. She added that the temporary head was interrogating the criminals downstairs in the prison. Lucius asked who it was, and Robin explained that the person in charge was a royal knight, Karen Bellix. Hearing the name, Lucius reacted with surprise. He then instructed Robin to have the mermaid drugged and placed in the bath. After that, he headed downstairs with Robin and Eve to the prison. When they met Karen, Lucius observed her closely. In the original game, Karen Bellix had been a very popular heroine, renowned for her perfect appearance and gentle manner, though she was known to be cold-hearted toward criminals. He had always been curious to see her in person. Karen greeted him, introducing herself as Karen Bellix of the Royal Knights. She apologized for her current state, explaining that she had just finished interrogations and asked for his understanding. She had been investigating the handling of illegal aphrodisiacs. Lucius assured her it was fine and thanked her for acting as the temporary head. Then he noticed something in her hand and asked why she was holding a vegetable peeler. Karen calmly corrected him, saying it was not a vegetable peeler, but an interrogation tool designed to peel skin. Lucius apologized, remarking that people often called such devices vegetable peelers, though she referred to that as a mere social habit. He realized that dying quickly would be preferable to being captured by someone like her. Karen noted that the criminal she had questioned was yellow, though the injections made him appear red at the moment. She explained that the item she held was part of the aphrodisiac evidence and that she would send the criminal report and other materials to the royal palace later. Lucius acknowledged her explanation. She then handed him a blue-colored tube, telling him it increased drive levels and was made using mermaid blood. Once Lucius finished his work, Karen returned to the capital. Before she left, he asked her to report to the palace that the Demon King had mentioned Evangeline. Later, Lucius returned to the restroom, deciding to wash up and relax. However, when he entered, he found the mermaid already there. She teasingly asked whether he had come because he wanted to be romantically involved with a mermaid. Lucius admitted that he had asked them to place Selu there. He was genuinely curious why people were so obsessed with mermaids. Selu responded by saying that there was always a reason for such obsession, and she wondered if he truly wanted to know. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed from outside. Lucius paused and asked what was happening, then stepped out to check. He found Robin arguing with an agitated man. Robin insisted that he had told the man to wait outside, but the man insisted that it was an emergency and that he needed to speak with Lucius immediately. He introduced himself as the head of the Port City Union. Lucius told Robin to wait and asked the man what the matter was. The Union head explained that he had heard Eve had been captured and had rushed to check on her. Lucius thought the man was overstepping, but decided it would be best to speak with him briefly before sending him away. Before inviting the man inside, Lucius instructed Selu to hide quietly in the back. Lucius and the Union head then sat at a table. The man began explaining a horrifying torture method, that an injection that hardened the victim's muscles to the point of immobility, followed by an external pump supplying nutrients and blood. Selu silently listened from her hiding place. Lucius asked whether such a person would die from having their muscles hardened, but the Union head said they would remain alive, fully able to see, hear, and think, yet unable to move or speak. Lucius realized Eve would exist in an eternal state of suffering if subjected to such a fate. He told the Union head that he would look into the matter. The man, assuming Lucius had been exhausted, excused himself and left, hoping Lucius would consider the information positively. Once the man left, Lucius returned to the bath. Settling into the tub, he muttered that those men were truly evil and that he could now understand Eve's and Selu's actions more clearly. He even thought he might be one of the nice ones among them. The mermaid, sharing the bath, questioned whether he really believed that. Lucius said he still needed to think about everything and make his decision, both regarding a reason to spare Eve, who was a murderer, and the reason people were so drawn to mermaids. Selu replied that she could help him if he understood the reason. Lucius said he would listen to whatever she had to say and consider it. And with that, the two of them began their intense cardio session in the bath. After completing their cardio session, the group took a brief moment to catch their breath. Lucius broke the silence by saying that he would do everything in his power to save both her and Eve. The mermaid listened quietly before replying that it certainly sounded as though he intended to give his utmost effort. Lucius admitted that once he had committed himself, he could no longer stop. Having already taken a decisive step forward, he was prepared to do anything within his means to see it through. The mermaid then began to speak of the past. She explained that when Eve was still very young, she had once swum alone and reached the Mermaid Island by herself. Eve's real mother, she revealed, had been murdered by a human man. As the head of the mermaids, she had taken Eve into her group out of responsibility and compassion, even though Eve was not truly one of them. Lucius was visibly surprised by this revelation and remarked that Eve had always believed herself to be a mermaid. The mermaid responded gently but firmly, saying that Eve could not breathe underwater and could never truly live as a mermaid. More than choosing between being a mermaid or a human, that child simply longed for a family. Lucius asked what she meant by that, pointing out that Eve already had her as a mother and a family. The mermaid replied that while she herself was a mermaid, Eve needed to live among humans. Her only wish was for Eve to find happiness, and with that, she said she would leave everything in Lucius's hands. Later that day, Lucius went downstairs to see Eve. As he walked, his thoughts drifted back to the world he once lived in, where he had a precious younger sister. He remembered the desperation he had felt to protect her and to hold on to the idea of family. In that moment, he realized that he could understand Eve a little better. With that understanding came a plan, an idea of how he might save both Eve and Selu. When Lucius finally approached Eve, he spoke without hesitation and told her that they should get married. Eve stared at him in disbelief and accused him of being crazy, saying that it was far too early in the morning for such nonsense. Lucius tried to explain, saying that if someone like him, who belonged to the same party as the hero, were to marry her, perhaps they could show repentance and ask for forgiveness on his behalf. Eve responded sharply, saying that if that was the case, he might as well kill her instead, rather than suggesting such a thing. She called him a lunatic and remarked that even the color of his eyes seemed to have changed. Lucius insisted that marrying her was the only way to save her, explaining that her mother herself had asked him to do so, recalling the bond they had shared when they had slept together. Eve froze and demanded that he repeat what he had just said. Lucius calmly repeated himself and added that her mother had been an extraordinary woman. Eve reacted sharply, wondering aloud if Lucius had completely lost his mind. Lucius, unfazed by her outburst, remarked with mocking confidence that mermaids were surprisingly easy to deal with once they were out of the water. Enraged, Eve threatened to kill him. When Lucius stepped closer and reached toward her, she warned him not to come any nearer. He quickly replied that she was misunderstanding him and asked her to stay still for a moment. Eve repeated her threat, saying that if he touched her, she would not hesitate to kill him. Lucius told her to calm down, adding provocatively that her resistance would only work against her. He claimed that her anger and defiant expression would merely excite him further. Eve bared her teeth and gestured to her legs, asking if he could still speak so lightly after seeing them. Lucius, instead of backing away, commented that she was beautiful regardless. He then explained his intention that he planned to negotiate with others to save her, offering his service to the country in exchange. To do so, he proposed marriage once again. As Eve fell silent, her thoughts drifted inward. In the original version of the story, she remembered her biological parents had been murdered, and she herself had suffered abuse throughout her childhood. According to that fate, she was supposed to fall in love with the hero, and her hatred-filled life would eventually transform into happiness. However, The story was already diverging from its original path. In this altered reality, she felt that only she herself could put an end to her suffering. She recalled the first method from the original game for dealing with her character, praising her appearance, the very thing she was most insecure about. Breaking the silence, Eve asked if Lucius was truly serious. He replied without hesitation, again calling her beautiful. She questioned him further, pointing out that everyone would judge her and whisper behind her back, and asked whether he genuinely intended to marry her despite that. Lucius followed what she recognized as the second method from the original story, firmly stating that he was serious and repeating his proposal. When Lucius reached out to her again, Eve warned him that she would kill him if he ever abandoned her. He answered calmly that such a thing would never happen, taking her words as a sign of acceptance. He pulled her closer, and Eve quickly told him to wait, explaining that she had only been taken by surprise. Lucius paused and asked if he should stop. Eve replied that it did not matter if they went through with it, but insisted that he choose whether to address her formally or informally. Lucius smiled and replied teasingly, saying he would show her what heaven looked like, and deliberately chose to speak informally. In the heat of the moment, he tore at the fabric of her clothing. Shocked, Eve demanded to know what he was doing. Lucius answered that he assumed she wanted this, since she had told him to speak informally. His actions left her feeling strange and unsettled, caught between resistance and confusion. Soon after, Lucius removed his own clothes, and the scene shifted as the two of them moved together, their confrontation giving way to a physically intense moment, described only as another kind of cardio session, leaving the rest to implication rather than words. As night fell, Eve and Lucius spent time together in what they discreetly referred to as another round of cardio, a private moment shared away from the eyes of others. A few days later, rumors began to spread through the castle, carried in hushed voices among the guards. Two guards stood talking quietly. One of them asked the other if he had heard the latest news. When the second guard asked what he meant, the first explained that the kingdom had officially permitted their master to marry the half-mermaid. He added that there had even been a condition attached to the decision that the sins attributed to both the mermaid and the half-mermaid would be pardoned. The second guard remarked that the one thing their master had requested after defeating the Demon King was something related to mermaids. Laughing, he said that their master had saved the nation in this lifetime just to obtain that so-called mermaid specialty. The first guard joined in the laughter and mentioned that people had even started calling their master a wermaid. Despite the jokes, he quickly added that he still deeply respected him. The second guard agreed, saying that of course everyone should respect their master, as he was someone they ought to follow, known for his frugal lifestyle and honest character. Unbeknownst to them, Lucius had arrived nearby and overheard the entire conversation. Without warning, he struck one of the guards across the face. The second guard panicked immediately and stammered that he had just remembered some urgent work that needed his attention. Later that day, Lucius sat alone in his office, lost in thought. He reflected on how mermaids were often treated no differently than monsters, and it seemed to him that much of this situation stemmed from misunderstanding rather than malice. Still, aside from the fact that he was now getting married, nothing fundamental had changed. People were simply acknowledging and accepting it in their own ways, whether openly or quietly. Standing by the window, Lucius looked outside and noticed the guards lowering their heads as he passed. One of them whispered sharply to another, telling him to keep his head down because the head knight was disappointed in him. A moment later, there was a knock at the door, followed by a familiar voice announcing, "It's Sierry." When she entered and greeted him, Lucius asked what the matter was and whether she would tell him why she had come. Sierry hesitated before saying that she had heard about his upcoming marriage. She questioned why he was marrying someone like that, admitting that she could not understand his decision. Lucius replied calmly, asking whether she no longer needed him to comfort her. He then invited her to come inside properly. As she stepped in, Lucius thought to himself that Sierry must have gathered great courage to come here, knowing how she felt about him. He acknowledged inwardly that he liked her as well, and that it was finally time to speak honestly. Lucius closed and locked the door behind them, and turning to face her, suggested that they sit down and talk for a while. Lucius locked the door behind them and turned toward Sierry, his tone controlled but heavy with meaning. He reminded her of a moment from the past, asking whether she remembered the day she had pleaded with him to save Ira and the Pleasant daughters. Back then, she had urged him to give the bandits a chance, insisting that mercy aligned with their doctrines. Sierry acknowledged, that she remembered it clearly. Lucius continued, pointing out that she herself had argued for compassion and second chances. However, he questioned why those standards suddenly changed when it came to Eve. He asked whether Eve was not worthy of the same opportunity, or whether Sierra had already decided that no forgiveness could be extended to her. Sierra, confused by his line of reasoning, apologized and asked him to clarify what he meant. In response, Lucius stated coldly that Eve's sins were considered too grave, and that, in his view, the only path left for her to obtain pardon was through marriage to him. He added that she was the one who understood him best, the one he favored most, and yet he could not comprehend why Sierra had come to confront him without first understanding his true intentions. Speaking more frankly, Lucius admitted that he had already conducted the so-called cardio session with Eve and Selu, implying that much of what he had claimed earlier was false. Still, he asked Sierra to believe him, questioning whether this explanation would be enough to make things right. Sierra admitted that she had been unaware of all this and offered a sincere apology. Lucius asked her not to repeat such misunderstandings in the future, his voice softening as he tried to console her. Without further words, they began their own version of the cardio session, the unspoken emotions between them finally taking over the room. They continued their cardio session late into the night, and by the time exhaustion set in, they fell asleep together. When morning arrived, Eve awoke with a lingering sense that the wedding was drawing near, and that everything was finally moving toward its conclusion. Lucius, however, was already preoccupied. He stood reading a letter he had just received, his expression darkening as he considered its contents. He wanted to reject the request outright, but he knew it would be impossible to do so, as it had come directly from the royal palace. The letter demanded that he obtain the royal sword in preparation for a potential attack by Evangeline. Eve, upon hearing this, felt uneasy and wondered whether the palace was being unreasonable by forcing another delay to the wedding. After all, the royal palace had recently pardoned her for her past felonies and had even granted her a pool as a sign of favor. It felt awkward, almost ungrateful, to refuse their request immediately after receiving such benefits. Troubled by her thoughts, Eve went to her mother and called out to her. Selu observed her carefully and remarked that it seemed Eve was in a hurry to get married, teasing her gently about her impatience. Elsewhere, Lucius spoke with Ira, instructing her to arrange the next payment he needed to make. Ira then asked who would take charge in his absence while he was away. Lucius replied calmly that, according to the law, his wife Eve would have to assume that responsibility. At that moment, Eve arrived and questioned what he meant. She pointed out that she was still considered a criminal and a half-mermaid, and that she knew nothing about managing estate affairs. Lucius responded that he believed she was capable of handling it. He added that the royal palace had not appointed anyone else as head in his place, and that Eve could simply follow Ira's guidance, along with Sherry's, when it came to estate matters. Ira smiled and said she was looking forward to working with her. Eve then remarked on how pretty Ira and Sierra were and asked about their relationship with Lucius. Feeling uneasy, Ira moved behind Lucius, admitting she was scared. Eve accused Lucius of having relationships with all the women working there. Lucius reacted with visible irritation and asked what she took him for. He insisted that it was only Eve, Selu, Sierra, and Ira, and that they were merely companions and colleagues. Eve replied that it was good for him, trying to sound dismissive. Lucius then abruptly asked her why she had almost been executed in the past. Eve answered that people could do wrong while simply trying to live, and that he knew that better than anyone. She admitted she had committed many mistakes and was probably in no position to judge, but she still wanted to know whom he cared for the most. From the side, Selu laughed, prompting Eve to snap at her to stop. Selu replied teasingly that Eve had skillfully avoided the question. Eve grew flustered and tried to pull away, telling Lucius to let her go. He held her gently and asked what was wrong, urging her to calm down. Lucius then stated clearly that he loved Eve the most. Eve was taken aback and after a pause said that if that was truly the case, then it was fine. Lucius smiled and told her she was lovely, which was why he intended to marry her. Eve smiled in return and told him to stop, though he continued by calling her beautiful, prompting her to repeat her request. Turning serious again, Lucius told Ira that he would handle everything that needed to be settled before he left, asked her to take care of the estate in the meantime. Ira handed Eve a file and explained that it was the last document that needed to be sent. Just then, Lucius remarked that there was no reason for a letter to arrive from the Elf Kingdom. When he read it, he discovered it was from Erina Shildren. The contents shocked him, particularly the line suggesting that even his father in heaven would bless her for choosing better than bestiality. Lucius clenched his jaw in anger and silently vowed that he would kill her the next time he saw her. A few days later, they stood before the dungeon where the holy sword was sealed. Karen Bellix addressed IA and asked whether he had ever been to Lord Petta's domain. The dungeon raid party announced member 1 was Karen Bellix, with a love meter of 45, known as a beautiful woman who showed no mercy to criminals. Dungeon Raid Party member 2 was the hero IA, who commented that Karen had worked hard during their last mission. Dungeon Raid Party member 3 was Erina Ahildern herself, who casually remarked that he had once said he was attracted to seafood and that she had met him at just the right time. Everything unfolded near the city, directly in front of the dungeon where the holy sword lay sealed deep within. Lucius spoke to Erina in a restrained but firm manner, telling her that she needed to understand that his love life was a private matter and not something for others to interfere with. He added that she should have been taught better discipline and restraint through proper family education, especially given her background. Erina reacted instantly and violently to his words. She raised her voice, shouting at him to shut up, her anger spilling out without control. She then began accusing him, declaring that even her own mother, the queen, had been taken completely by surprise by the news surrounding him. Her tone carried both frustration and wounded pride. Lucius responded calmly but sharply, saying that he did not believe Erina was capable of standing up to her mother without being at fault herself. He further told her that if she truly had no remaining business there, then she should leave immediately and stop wasting time. Just as Lucius was about to turn away, Erina stopped him, reaching out and asking him to wait. Her voice changed slightly as she explained that she actually had something she wanted to ask of him. She then stated almost casually that she had told IA about a secret elven art, one that allowed women to bear children on their own. She added that she wished to try this art that very night and bluntly instructed Lucius to keep his mouth shut about it. Hearing this, Lucius felt a surge of disbelief. In his mind, he reflected that she was asking him for a favor right after confronting him aggressively about his private life, and on top of that, she was now bringing up a strange baby-making art. The situation struck him as absurd and unsettling, leading him to think that she might be completely unhinged. Despite his thoughts, he responded aloud in a composed manner, saying that it was fine and that in the end, he wished happiness for both of them. Erina replied by remarking that, as expected,